is the big difference between elite army players and horde army players, and elite armies versus horde armies in general. So, elite army players, they tend to focus on units, they tend to focus on what I would call 1 versus 1 fights. Individual units being able to go 1 versus 1 against pretty much anything else in their weight class. Okay, so if I've got a bunch of, let's say, Blade Guard veterans or Death Company, I want those units to be able to absolutely fill in melee most things that they come across. Like, that's what I want them to be achieving. And I don't want to be taking 2 or 3 units to achieve that goal. I want to take 1 unit of Blade Guard veterans, put them in my army, and then that's going to cover that particular aspect. Or if something's really good, I want to take it and spam it 3 times. Okay, it's kind of a bit of a paradox, a bit of a dichotomy. But the point is like, elite army players will want a unit to be able to go 1 versus 1, or to single-handedly, and if it's very good, they'll spam it, or they'll have a unit that can single-handedly cover a gap in their army. Okay, so a good example of this is early on, I think, is sort of 10th edition, we saw a lot of Marine players taking like a single unit of Eradicators and being like, this unit of Eradicators is going to cover a lot of my anti-tank options now. Or maybe they're taking like a single unit of Eradicators and like a single Dreadnought of some variety. Like, that's going to cover my anti-tank now. And then I'm going to take like a unit of I think it was like Blood End players. I'm going to take a unit of like Death Company, something like that. And it was like 1 unit can do 1 job. The problem that I find with elite armies, personally, is that if that 1 unit goes away, there's no redundancy. So, if you are relying upon that 1 unit of Eradicators, or that 1 unit of Eradicators and maybe 1 other anti-tank unit to cover your long-range anti-tank, when those go away, there's no redundancy. There's no, well, now I can rely on the other 3 units that I've got. It's like, no, that unit had 1 job. If that unit dies, that job can't be performed anymore. But on the flip side, elite army units they tend to be much more efficient. So you could be like, I'm going to take a Death Company, and it's going to charge into almost anything on the opposing side of the board, and it's going to delete it. It's almost like a magic missile. It's going to go in there, and it's going to delete it. Okay? It's going to delete it. You basically can't do that in a Horde army. In a Horde army, we have a golden rule. If it's worth taking once, it's worth taking 3 times. Because the first time, the first unit's going to fail, second unit's going to die, and the third unit is going to get the job done. So you don't ever take 1 or 2 Lehman Russes. You take 3, 4, 5 Lehman Russes. You don't ever take 1 platoon of infantry. You take 3, 4, 5 platoons of infantry. You don't ever take like 1 artillery piece. You take like 2, 3 sources of indirect fire. It's because if you take 1 Basilisk, it's just not going to do anything. If you take 1 Field Horse Battery, it's not going to do anything. But you take multiples of them, and they start achieving stuff. Now, what I think is a great strength about Horde armies, which people often overlook, is that they have a huge amount of redundancy, which matters massively going into the late game. So in the late game, let's say you start off with sort of 80 to 100 infantry. At the beginning of the game, you need that 80 to 100 infantry, and your opponent might kill like 60 of them. Okay. Now, it's not like suddenly, okay, let's say in the first 3 turns, your opponent kills like 60 infantry. It's not like you get to turn 4, turn 5, and it's like, oh, well, now I don't have like my redundancy. I don't have the number of infantry that I started with, so now this unit starts performing badly. No, because you're in the late game, both armies have battered the shit out of each other. Your army the units that, you know, we said normally need 3 of them, well, now maybe you only need 2 of them because they're only having to handle like scraplets and stuff like that. But the problem with but Horde armies are not infallible. The problem with Horde armies, for me, that I tend to find is they have pretty terrible force concentration. So what that means is you can cover a wide front, and you can cover like let's say you've got about 600 points aiming for each objective, and about 200 points set on your home objective. Brilliant. Okay, because you've got so many models, you've had to deploy on a wide frontage. You're attacking across all fronts. Okay, so now you're making a play for every single objective. But the problem you might find is that your opponent, because he's an elite army, he's not had to deploy his models so spread out. He's got all the... He can hide his whole army behind 1 or 2 L-shaped ruins. So now what that means is your opponent... You're sending 600 points each objective, but your opponent might just go after 2 objectives. That means he can apply 1,000 points to each one of those objectives. And his units, remember, 1 versus 1 are better than your units. So it's like, now you're being double doozied. He's got more points coming at you in a concentrated area than you have. And that very much likely means that he's probably meeting you 1-to-1 or near 1-to-1 parity on units, number of units. So elite armies are really good at smashing an area and basically, you know, against a Horde army. And the Horde army kind of lumbering round to try and respond to it. But if your opponent smashes you off like 2 objectives over the course of turn 2, turn 3, and it might take you a turn or so to start responding, it might be by that time it's too late. And even if you end up doing a lot of damage to them, they've already got the points that they need. But this is why I think Guard is a really, really powerful Horde army. And something that I think is really, really underestimated about Guard, which is that we're a Horde army that does a lot of shooting. Most of the Horde armies are close combat orientated. Think about orcs, think about tyranids. So as a result, if you smash one of those melee focused armies, it can take them a while to get over there to try and respond. But with Guard, if you smash one of their columns, as it were, one of their points, then the other 2 don't need to move there to respond. They just need to get line of sight, or they just need to get into range. And it's much easier to get into a 24-inch range than it is to get into a melee range if you're on the other side of the board. So that's where I think the advantage of Guard is. Now, in terms of the core difference, so that's sort of the core difference in the play styles of the armies. I think the core difference between the players comes down to, I would say, sort of mentality. So I have run elite armies. I've run plenty of elite armies. Okay, I've run my Black Templars in a very elite way, not just in the Black Tide. And one of the things that you find with an elite army is it's a real power trip. Going from a Horde army and then going to an elite army is a heady experience, because suddenly, you know, you can actually do things like close combat. Like suddenly your characters actually feel powerful and meaningful. Like you send an Imperial Guard with a commander with a Power Fist in there. His 3 attacks hit on 4s. Maybe they'll chip a wound off, maybe they won't. You send an Emperor's Champion in there, or a Space Marine Captain with a Relic Blade, and he's going to start slicing and dicing. He's going to start slicing down half an enemy squad. He's going to start taking on enemy characters in single combat. So it's definitely... It feels like a bit of a power trip, but that not in a bad way, in a good way. You get to feel powerful, and that's, I think, if that's what you're wanting for an army, if that's what you're sort of wanting to feel in your game, that's what you're going to get from running an elite army. You're going to get to feel the power of your unit individually going in there and fucking something up. But it's high risk, high reward. I tend to find that elite army players tend to be, they can be a little bit more, they can be a little bit more gamblers. You know, they're willing to throw that unit out there, go in there and fuck shit up. But if it doesn't go well, if they fail the charge, it can sometimes spell doom for their army. But they're willing to take that risk. They're willing to go for that 9-inch rerollable charge Because if they get it, they get to feel that power trip. If they don't get it, well then they're completely fucked. I tend to find Horde army players tend to be a lot more meticulous, a lot more... No, meticulous isn't even the right word. A lot more methodical, and maybe slightly more risk adverse. Because if you say to a Horde player like, if you say to a Horde player, okay, you're only allowed to like one of this unit, they're going to feel wildly uncomfortable. Horde players like to have the number of models they have, and they like to have the number of units they have, because they like to have that safety blanket. They like to have that insurance that if they send a unit out there and it fucks up, it's okay, because they've got a whole bunch of other units backing it up. It can feel... A great example of this, coming away from 40k for a second, but it's very, very important. A great example of this is in bolt action. So in bolt action, you've got your tank, and it has its one shot a turn anti-tank gun. And if you when you roll that dice, it can be really exciting. It's like, oh, do you hit? Do you not? Ooh, ooh. It can be really like, it can be a real rush, like getting that hit to it. There's nothing more. There's nothing like the thrill of popping enemy tank in bolt action with just a cheeky long range tank on tank shot. It's really, really good. You don't really have that with Horde armies. With Horde armies, it's like, okay, I'm not going to assign one unit to this job. I'm going to assign 3 units to this job. Because that way I know the job's going to get done. It's that peace of mind. So I think that's the big difference in sort of mentality between the players. Elite armies, they are more high risk, high reward, but can feel like more of a power trip, can feel like your units are actually powerful. Horde armies tend to be much more methodical, much more risk averse, and just much more. They can feel much more reliable. Not always true though. I mean, orcs are a great example of of an exception that proves the rule. I would say guard are an example of maybe where you feel that reliability. It's often why guard players like to guardify any army they go to, because they're seeking that safety, they're seeking that familiarity. They're like, I know that if it's worth bringing 1 time, it's worth bringing 3 times. I know that from when I played guard. So like, if you have a guard player go over to Space Marines, he's not going to have like 1 gladiator. Long term, he's going to get 3 gladiators. He's going to get that. Because he needed that for his guard army. He wants to do that for his Space Marine army. Because the idea of having 1 gladiator covering his long anti-tank is fucking alien to him. He needs to have 3 of them, because that way he knows his anti-tank is covered. Now, going on to your last point, what factions do I think have the most problems from a game design standpoint? It's kind of tricky to say. I think Genestealer Cult, ever since 8th edition, Genestealer Cult have been struggling to find their way. So in 8th edition, I think 8th edition Genestealer Cult was perfect. And then I think in 9th edition and 10th edition, they've just been floundering, and it's just been fucked up. So I think GSC traditionally have, I don't know, that might have changed now with the new things, which I've not read yet, but generally speaking, I'd say Genestealer Cult traditionally have struggled to land consistent game mechanics. Although 9th edition was okay with like crossfire and stuff, it just took a little while for them to sort of get it going, I suppose. And then I think Admech's a faction that always seems to struggle with mechanics. They always seem to be overcomplicated. And I think Tau are a faction that struggle because they're so focused from a game design standpoint on shooting, and I think that you need to bring the Tau shooting down a bit, and you need to make Tau less of a we only do shooting faction, and the Tau units only do shooting, but we've got all these auxiliaries that do other things, and you make them a much more varied faction. Tau should be Xenos Guard in many ways. But That would be, and then Votan at the moment. Votan, they're a new faction, but Votan just need more models. At the moment, they're struggling from lack of models. So yeah, Amir, I hope that helps, and thank you for your support, and I hope that answers your question. All right. Would you like to know more? If so, then please consider becoming a channel member or patron. By supporting the channel, not only will you be doing your part, but you'll also be helping me create more content for your viewing pleasure and unlocking a whole host of perks. You get everything from a badge next to your name, custom emojis, but the big one is access to the Mordian Glory Discord server, an online community with almost 2,500 active members. It's always popping off in the MG Discord. We've got channels for army lists, hobbying, tactics, stories, and even a pretty spicy meme section as well. For all you greenhorns that wanted to see the Mordian glory hole, today is your lucky day. And joking aside, I do want to say a massive thank you to all of the current channel members and patrons. You guys are amazing. Truly the lifeblood of the channel. I could not do Mordian Glory full-time without the incredible and generous support of my members. So thank you guys so much. And last but certainly not least, I want to say a personal thank you to all of my top tier Patreons. These are the War Masters, the people who have truly gone above and beyond the call of duty. So a heartfelt thank you to Alex Dengal, Bonbon Vert, Lord Pryor, Mark Panconi, RJ Scorpion, Swordfish Trombone, Try Again Bragg, John Stubbs, Nick Walsh, Diesel Fox, and August Barney. Seriously guys, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Your support is incredible and it makes a huge difference. Thank you so much. That's all for now. Hope you've all enjoyed today's video, and of course, as always, see you guys next time.